Hello and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Chats on leadership, life and the lessons we learn, often the hard way. So this week we're talking about what it means to prioritise with purpose when everything feels urgent. In a world of constant demand and competing expectations, how do we make space for what really matters? And I am joined by the amazing Faye Wallis, who joins me with a wealth of experience as an HR coach, podcaster, and creator of the very fabulous Essential HR Planner. We'll unpack the practical and emotional layers of prioritisation, from proven frameworks to internal resistance, and discover how to move from overload to clarity. Faye, hello!
Hello, it's so exciting to be here.
Well, it's very exciting to have you here. And as I just mentioned there, my God, the Essential HR Planner, I want to get into lots about that. I mean, I want to applaud every time I even mention it with my use of it, but I'm going to try to do things in some semblance of order. And I've said a tiny little bit about who is Faye Wallis, but it would be brilliant to actually hear who you really are from you yourself. So what would you like to say about yourself by way of introduction?
Well, I've been totally overthinking this because I know that you prefer people to talk about themselves outside of the context of job titles. And it made me think, oh my goodness, we so put ourselves into boxes, don't we, according to job titles and other identities. So I thought I would share my values as
Lovely.
a way of introduction. So my three core values are learning, compassion and empowerment. The learning one is because I absolutely love learning. I'm constantly learning new things and I love sharing that knowledge. So that links in with the empowerment part. Empowerment really comes because I love the idea of being able to support others to achieve their goals or overcome their obstacles. And compassion links into that because I think that's often the missing piece when people are looking for support. Sometimes support can be very, very advice driven, and that's not necessarily what you always need. You need someone to be able to sit with you and understand and be empathetic and sit alongside you. So they're my three core values that kind of underpin everything that I do. And then alongside that, other things that are really important to me are all the relationships in my life. So I'm very relationships focused. I love my family. I'm part of a large, blended, loving, enormous family and spend a lot of time seeing all of the different family members and also my friends and everyone I meet, really. So there'll be no getting rid of me now, Bobby, now that we've met each other.
It certainly feels that way because, of course, we haven't known each other that long, and yet every time we end up on something like this, I mean, I have to tell the audience, we've already been chatting for 45 minutes before we even bothered to put the recording stuff on. But I find myself drawn to you and just so easily every time that we actually speak. And it's interesting because before we pressed record, we were talking about that whole distinction between practical advice and care and support and how those two blend together. And for the topic that we're actually talking about today, about that, the being sharp, not busy, or whatever it might be, in the way that we actually want to be working, the care and support that I can see for me, first and foremost, when I first came across you, was the planner. And yet what I see and what I feel and what I know now that we've actually been together a little bit, and chatting, is that comes through so loud and clear in terms of who you actually are as well. And I know you were saying that your penchant is much more to get into the advice mode, and you've realised, in particularly with family members, that it's much better to be the other side of that element to it. So I just wonder if there's more that you want to say about that, about where you can see the dial turning for yourself on the advice driven versus the compassion element with the things that you do and the things that you are bringing to many, many people in the HR community.
I think, well, having trained as a coach, the whole premise behind it is that you do sit alongside the person and empower them to come up with solutions. So I think it's when I started doing my coach training, which was 9 years ago, that I really began to see the power of, oh, people actually don't need you to jump in and say, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And that can be overwhelming. But when I very first started working for myself, the majority of my work was actually supporting people who were going through redundancy. And I very quickly realised it's no good saying to someone, right, let's crack on with your CV if they're absolutely devastated about having lost their job. And actually, it's something I've heard you talk about on the podcast before, just how much of an impact that sort of massive change and transition can have for someone. And I really recognised the value in compassion and being able to support them through that emotionally as well as practically. So I think that's when I really started leaning into the compassion side of things. But also for me personally, I used to see things in quite a binary way. I used to really believe that there was a right way to do things and a wrong way. And I just needed people to tell me the right way and then it would all be fine. And then over time, and I guess through experience, I have realised more and more and more how completely incorrect that approach is and how limiting it is. And that in fact, there isn't one perfect answer or one perfect framework or one perfect series of steps for us to all to take when we're in a particular situation. Everyone responds differently. Everyone is different. And really, it's about finding a way that works for you. And yeah, so I think that's probably what comes to mind when you ask me that question is how unique we all are and how we need to have that compassion and that open-mindedness really to find the things that are going to help us to thrive in our lives and our careers.
I love that. And this is probably, hopefully this won't throw you, because I know that I sort of like said, oh, we could talk about this and we could talk about that. But of course, I have very recently heard you speak at the HR Big Meet and your presentation was awesome. And we got into a whole load of stuff about Star Trek. And listening to you saying that now, that is so much about the pendulum as such between Spock-like behaviour, which is all rational. See, I was listening. Rational and organised and everything else besides. And Kirk, I'm sorry if there's audience here who aren't Star Trek, and if you don't know what we're talking about, you have to go and start watching Star Trek. It's as simple as that. But the Kirk element to it is around the emotions and feelings. And I don't know if I've said this to you before, or I'm pretty sure I may well have said it on one of the recordings, but while you talk about Spock and Kirk, I talk about wisdom and compassion.
Oh, okay.
Or wisdom and kindness, which sort of like hones in a bit. But I'm often saying to people, you can be terribly kind to somebody, that sort of like rescuer, fixer type style of all the practical, all the advice giving, which of course you're trying to do from a kind place, but it's not necessarily wise. And so it's finding that balance of both. And as you say, we're all ultimately very unique. And so some people may well be much more on the wise side than they are the kind side. But then that learning of that self-awareness to actually get yourselves into a different position. And you were saying there about being, or in the past have been quite binary. So whatever you were doing for self either wasn't necessarily wise or wasn't necessarily kind with the way that you were actually having things. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I was definitely not kind to myself at all. I could be very self-critical, and that's something I can slip into quite easily now. I have to really watch it. I think a big defining moment for me was I was very lucky to have someone on my podcast as a guest called Tom Cleary, and we were talking about resilience, and I didn't know what he was going to talk about. And he essentially shared that one of the most helpful things you can do to become more resilient is to develop self-compassion and be kind to yourself. And it really had a massive impact on me. It was something I just hadn't considered before. I wasn't expecting him to say that in the slightest, but it was such a powerful message. And it's one that I really hope anyone listening right now to this episode who may have been being incredibly tough on themselves can take a moment to consider and actually think we're not doing ourselves any favours when we are approaching things in a very binary way or being very self-critical. Actually telling yourself off or saying, oh no, you didn't tick that particular box, or you're a complete failure. isn't helping us, it's just making us feel terrible. But actually, if you can approach yourself with that self-compassion, you're much more likely to be able to say, it's okay, everyone makes mistakes, what's the learning, how can you carry on, how can you move forward? Actually, you're much more likely to be able to carry on moving forward. So yeah, I guess that whole piece around compassion isn't just about compassion for others, it's about compassion for ourselves as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I was learning to coach, I remember there was a very lovely person that I worked with who I would probably imagine would refer to herself as binary as well. And I remember her always, whilst we were going through the development program, be saying, well, is it this or that? And the coaches spent their whole time going, no, it's this and that. And so that within all of that you're actually talking about there, I mean, the word that pops up in my mind is acceptance. And the other thing I was thinking as you were talking there was about our version of resilience, because I think I spent a lot of time in that self-critical chat, but also believing that resilience was stiff upper lip and having it all buttoned down, and I can definitely be like that in my bustly practical mode every now and again without really taking account of how I'm feeling. And I guess that's my childhood, or let's just pop into the military after that sort of childhood, and so it was like, oh, we could do everything. But resilience in my mind these days, in the way that you're describing, is much softer than that, in order to get that fluidity and gentleness to self builds such strength to your value of empowerment, which is just so much stronger than the battling on, keeping going. I've got to get through everything on my to-do list and everything else besides. And so I think that I'm ever hopeful with the things that myself, with guests and with Bridget, that we're talking about, pulls into that the whole time about what's needed for self first.
Yes, and like you, I used to really think that was what resilience was. Keep on going, even if times are really tough. And I've really realised I don't believe that's the case at all. And if we want to be able to keep on going, we have got to be looking after ourselves, because if you just keep on ploughing forward when things are tough, eventually you keel over, because there's only so much stress and lack of sleep or whatever ploughing on looks like for you that we can tolerate as humans. So actually, for long-term happier resilience, there is some self-care that you've got to be doing, and part of that is being kind to yourself when things are difficult and recognizing you are human. Humans are fallible, we do make mistakes, but it's about being able to learn from them and move forward. That's the important bit, I think. So
great segue then, because we are meant to be talking about priorities. I think all of that, because what we're doing is that, where's the bedrock come from? Where's the bedrock for Faye Wallis being the person that I wanted to talk to about prioritising and organising and everything else besides? Because you have become something of my lifeline. So the planner became my lifeline, because I had found that whilst I've been very organised and there was a place for everything that I was doing whilst I was at work, that learning to work for myself as a consultant with all sorts of it's multiple inboxes, multiple emails, multiple clients, the whole works, I had to sort of start from scratch. And so whilst your planner is referred to as the essential HR planner, as I've been telling you and everybody else, I think it's so much more. We can all use it. But that bedrock that you have created for yourself so that you can start to be selective about the things that are required, I'm interested to know that learning for self clearly came before this beautiful book that's now on to number 3 or number 4, I think, came into being. So what was that like in terms of how you got to work out what it was you were doing around prioritising and not trying to go hell for leather at everything?
So when it came to putting the planner together, and it's so lovely to hear that you think it's helpful for people who aren't just in HR. I was really delighted when I very first released it as a hardback. It was because I had been releasing it as a PDF version, and people started saying, "Oh, could you make this as a hardback, please, Faye?" And I had no idea how to do that. I'd never created a physical product before. Most of my work is around coaching and training. So I very luckily had, or have, a friend who has a printing business. And I said to him, oh my gosh, I've been asked this. I have no idea how this works. Like, do you think it's something you'd be able to help me with? And he was amazing and said, yes, absolutely. And did an initial print run for me. But I would say he is perhaps an HR skeptic. And so it was a lovely surprise when he said to me, do you know what, this is quite good. I've printed one for myself and I've just skipped some of the HRE things at the beginning, but I'm using it all the time. And I was like, oh, I'm so pleased. So it was lovely to hear that. And I've had several people say to me over the years, oh, could you do an accountant's essential HR planner? Or could you do a one for, a different discipline? But there are only a few activities actually that are very HR specific. Most of everything that is in there should work for everybody. But the premise behind it really was quite similar to what you're saying, actually, Bobby. When I first started working for myself, I realised, I've got to get myself organised in a different way, and you have to learn about how to market your services. And I had no idea how to do that. And I came across a planner for social media, and it had lots of key awareness dates in there. And so that you can do social media posts like, oh, did you know today is, I don't know, drink a coffee day? And then you would do a post talking about like why you liked coffee or how coffee related to your business. And I just thought, oh my gosh, it would be so good if working in HR, everyone got to have access to all of these key dates, because you can do so many engaging activities for the people function around these dates. Maybe I'll create a version of this that actually has got dates that are more employee and company focused, and that also are focused on inclusion and well-being and diversity and all these really important things. So I'll do that, and I'll have some space at the front for people to think about their goals for the year as well, to think about, okay, well, why are we going to be celebrating these particular awareness days, or which ones are going to be most helpful at achieving my goals, and what do you want to be achieving that year. So actually the very first version of it was a very stripped back version, but over time it's evolved. And the reason it's evolved is because people have started using it and giving me feedback, and I've seen how they're using it, and I've realised actually the goals part is so incredibly important. It's almost impossible to prioritise and get to the end of the year and think, I'm so proud of what I've achieved this year, and I've really made progress in the way I wanted to at work or in my career or in my life. That doesn't really happen unless you've taken the time to reflect at the beginning and think about, what are my goals? So it was the goals section that kind of gradually expanded, and now I'm like, oh, calm down, Faye, it's really hard not to keep putting more stuff in as I keep thinking of new activities that can be helpful, but about really taking the time to reflect on, what is it that is going to help you with your career? What is it that you want to achieve for yourself that's going to really help you feel fulfilled by your work without having work completely take over your life? And also thinking about, for the organisation you're working for, what is going to be most helpful for them, what's strategic, what's going to have an impact. So really that is the key part of the prioritisation. The starting point is to be able to write that down and then go, right, this is what I want to achieve. Oh my gosh, I've got way too many things on here. So then cutting it back, that's the hardest bit, is letting go of things you want to do. But actually we're all human. We can only do so many things. We've got millions of other tasks, like business as usual stuff we have to do. So cutting it back and then thinking, okay, so how am I going to do this? And then putting in like key milestones and steps and planning it all in throughout the year. And then being able to reflect on a regular basis and review it and see, how is this going? Oh gosh, I'm nowhere near completing this goal. Maybe I need to change it a bit. Or, oh wow, I got that one done more quickly than I thought. So it's kind of a ever-evolving process throughout the year. But I think that key thing really is the goal setting, and then everything else cascades down from that.
I love the fact of the versatility of it, and yeah, okay, we're talking about the planner, but this, I think we can extrapolate that out to what I and I'm not going, this is what I do. I don't mean it from that perspective, but for anyone listening to this, just the versatility of it, because I will often talk to clients and teams about what does your shoreline look like. So that's the goals that you're talking about. And there was a lovely company that I worked with once who were always talking about BHAGs, as in big, hairy, audacious goals, which I love. So there's that. What's the ultimate that you're going for? And it's your compass, your North Star, however anybody's actually describing it. And then the working back from that, well, you know, the unrealistic deadline dates that people are so often given in organisations. And I think what tends to happen is that they start from where they are and they go, yeah, okay then. Whereas I'm going, okay, so that's the deadline that they actually want. Now let's talk about all the things that we've got to put in place in order to achieve that. And more often than not, that when you actually work all the way back, that the deadline that they've given you, you should have actually started the work 3 months ago or whatever it might be. But I do feel that is, it becomes so much more than the work, doesn't it? Because that's how you give influence. That's how you negotiate. That's how you communicate. That's how you can let people know, whether it's part and parcel of your boss or the wider organisation, where you are on a journey, if you've done that work. And I love the versatility of it, because of course some people, with the way that they actually work, and I think this is for a stress level as well, really need to know, I'm going to do this today. I am going to have ticked this off my list today. And the satisfaction and the confidence that it actually brings people. Now other people can go, I can work a week. I could be more fluid in a week. And so they wait until a Friday or whatever it might be, and then they plan for the following week. The planner allows for that. Or I have so many things, I need to place them into a month to make sure that the things get done, or the quarter, or the year. And the planner allows for all of that. So that's why I love the versatility that we said at the beginning, didn't we? That everybody is unique.
Yeah, I think I've tried to not be very prescriptive as to how people use it, and just say these are the tools. And so I know that people will use it in different ways. Some people love the weekly pages that are in there. Other people don't really use the weekly pages, but they love the end of month reflection. You just mentioned the quarterly piece. Yeah, lots of people like that. I think that's the thing. We are all different. It is about figuring out what is going to work best for you and what's going to help you get to the end of the year and look back and think, oh, I'm so pleased I've achieved all these things.
Absolutely.
And I'm where I wanted to be.
Yeah, and it's that whole thing that it's a very personal planner, and yet it is the bedrock of a way you can be in your organisation, and you can do it so that the things that I find, again, that I might have been doing it differently, but I love the way that it actually goes, so that I've been bringing that into the way that I've been working with teams, going, okay, right, you want to plan for this for the next 3 months. Okay, so let's plan for it for the next 3 months. So what are you doing? What are you doing this week? What will you be doing on this day? How do you check in? How do you check in with each other? How do you draw it down to 3 things a week? Or is it 5? Is it 6? It can't be 25. And the other thing that put me in mind, it was funny, the things coming together, because I don't know if you've read the book by Oliver Burkeman, 4,000 Weeks.
Yes.
I love that. Although it's bloody scary when I'm getting to my age thinking, oh, I don't want to know how many weeks that actually is until I'm 75 or whatever it is that he actually stipulates. But that joy of missing out, JOMO rather than FOMO, and having to make decisions about what's most important.
Yes, absolutely. It's that idea of, if you say yes to everything, what does that mean you're actually saying no to? So if you say yes to taking on another project when you haven't really got time for it, are you saying no to spending time with your family or doing a hobby or an activity you really want to do? There's real power in being able to have that reflection, yes, and then embrace the joy of missing out, like, oh, good, I said no to that because it means I can do these other fabulous things that I really want to do.
And when you started getting into that and not busting yourself apart almost with all of the things on the to-do list, which you've said something about when you were speaking recently, that the stress that can actually bring. What do you do to stop that horrible little feeling of guilt creeping in when you are adopting a JOMO place of being? What do you do? Oh,
yes. Well, where you've just mentioned the talk, so I guess for someone listening, they may not know this. So I am not a naturally organised person at all. And my children will laugh at me and say, oh, Mum, people think you're really organised. But really, just your planner and your phone tell you what to do.
Love that.
And I went through an awful time at work once where I just ended up completely burnt out and got signed off with anxiety, where I'd been pushing myself too hard and I hadn't been doing any of the things I've just mentioned. I just thought, just keep going, plough on, just keep on getting the work done, get the work done. But I wasn't approaching it in a systematic way and I wasn't pushing back on things at all. So I really learnt the hard way that it doesn't work. And I realised I haven't got, or I didn't have, good enough time management or good enough planning skills, and that these are learnable skills that we don't tend to get taught at all. So I just immersed myself in reading as much as I could, in testing out different things, in trying out different things to try and get better at this. And I think the more you start to see some of those things work, or you find the things that work for you, the easier it is to start saying no to stuff, because you realise how powerful it is. And you realise, oh my goodness, I've stopped feeling overwhelmed all the time. Or, oh, I can actually close my laptop and switch off from worrying about work now because I have got through it. So I used to find it very, very difficult and be worrying all the time. Oh my gosh, there's so much to do. There's so much to do. And that idea of joy of missing out just was not on my radar at all. Whereas now, I think because I have tested all this stuff and tried it so much, I sort of lean more towards the opposite. I'm looking far more for if I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed or a bit like my calendar's getting ridiculous, this is a clear sign I have to start saying no, or I have to start going back to some of the basics or trying some of the methods that I might have let slip, because I'm not a robot. I'm not some perfect person who, does my time management perfectly all the time. It is something I'm continuously working on and having to remind myself to do. And
with the things that you read, are there any things that you would be able to tell the audience about, go and read this, or this is a great method that, I mean, of course they can see it embroiled in the planner themselves, so go and buy one. But are there other things that you would say to people, oh, I'll read this, or this was a moment for me that was really useful?
Oh yeah, there are so many things that I found helpful over the years. My absolute favourite time management book is one that isn't as famous as all the others. It's called Tranquility by Tuesday, and it's written by Laura Vanderkam. And I first came across her when I was really getting into the whole idea of learning more about time management. She did a brilliant TED Talk. I can't remember the name of it, but it's wonderful. If you put in Laura Vanderkam TED Talk into Google, it will come up straight away. Yeah. And she had done a whole massive study looking at how people use their time. And she said, we have 168 hours in a week. We've got way more time than we actually think we have. It really is all about prioritization and deciding what you want to achieve. And what I love about her approach is it doesn't just laser in on work. So a lot of the traditional time management books, it's very, very work driven, whereas she looks at it more holistically. So, okay, what's important to you in your life and your work, and actually thinking that you have got 168 hours in the week, how can you start to achieve the things you want? So although obviously my planner it is predominantly focused on work, I love her focus on thinking about what do you want for yourself as a whole person outside of work as well. Lovely. And I think that can be very energizing, and it can really help with the resilience as well. So she talks about the importance of having time to yourself, even if you're in that season of life where you've got really little children, or maybe you're in a season of life where you have caring responsibilities for elderly parents, or your time is being pulled upon in multiple directions. It isn't just pulled upon by work. Yeah. And so I love her message of, it doesn't matter how much else you've got going on, actually try and think of at least one little thing each week that will help bring you some joy and happiness and contentment, and commit to doing that. Because although you might feel maxed out, you've got 168 hours. Like, which bit of your evening where you just sit down and watch Netflix or scroll through social media, what could you be doing instead? Could you be joining a book club, or singing in a choir, or going swimming with a friend, or it doesn't matter what it is, it's just something just for you. Yeah. And although my my children are getting much older now, I think it just was a really powerful message for me to hear, because when my children were little, I did find it really difficult to ever think that I should or could have time where I was really focused on what I wanted to do. And actually, when I started just doing one little thing each week, it made a massive difference. So that's probably not a book you're expecting me to recommend. I can now recommend lots of much more worky focused things.
Let's just talk about that for a moment, because I think you're absolutely right. Because this is the other thing. Do you remember those days, those heady days when we had a job where you could get through everything in your inbox, or your in tray as it was at the time, in a day? And I remember that so distinctly when I was really quite junior as an officer in the army, where this is all I got and I could do it in a day. And then I got a job as a senior captain where I was like, oh God, there's still all of this in my in tray. What am I to do? And I just worked all the hours trying to clear it all. And of course that was absolutely impossible, because wherever you are, and I think that this is more from a integration relationship, because that you said about earlier as well, perspective, that nobody's in tray is ever empty, because you're always waiting on something else from somebody else or whatever it might be. That's sort of like the interweaving of an organisation. And so I remember when I went from that step change of having, oh my God, I didn't have a Filofax, but it was something called day timers. Have you ever heard of that?
I did have a Filofax that I loved.
So it was like a Filofax, but it was day timers, and it was almost like a version of Faye Wallis's Extraordinary Planner, but it was that sort of like element about this was how you tried to separate things up. So I had that to begin with, but then when I had little children, I found myself with a life of Excel spreadsheets. I had, their summer holidays on spreadsheets so that I knew where the hell they were while I was trying to work full time. I had Christmas on a spreadsheet. Just the whole, and my life became one round of spreadsheets. But the other thing for not actually having time for myself was that what I also had in great abundance was resentment, because there wasn't that moment to self. So I think that, thank you for Laura Vanderkam before we go back onto, and then what are the best time management books? Because I think it probably is one of the most important things in amidst all of this, that we can plan. And again, if we're people like us, where we're planning to make sure that everybody else is all right, we're very capable of leaving ourselves out, which isn't right.
Absolutely. Gosh, yeah, I can really identify with the spreadsheets. Probably I always have to have a summer holidays one, Christmas holidays one. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I think I'm approaching the point where I won't need them, where the children are older now.
Yes.
My eldest son told me off for calling him a child the other day and pointed out he is an adult now. He is 18. I was like, yes, you are. Yes.
I keep using the word children, but one's over 40. So they give me quite a dirty look some of the time as well. But, I'm of an age now where I'm sort of like getting old enough that people just like pat me on the head and hope it's all right. So yes. But I think it was worth, it's worth all of that, because it's so important for ourselves to be in amidst our own plans, not sat somewhere on the sideline. So thank you.
Absolutely.
But go on then, I'll let you now. So what other things would you actually say for people to, rather than, so we don't get too worky, but maybe we ought to get a bit worky?
Yeah, so I think if I'm really procrastinating on something, it's going back to the Brian Tracy classic, who came up with the term "eat that frog," which is the idea of, and he got it from Mark Twain. So Mark Twain apparently said, like, the best thing you should do is eat a horrible, disgusting frog for breakfast. And what he meant was, whatever your most like dreaded, difficult, the task you're just putting off doing, whatever it is, just do that first.
Get it
and
done.
Then it's gone. So you're not thinking about it the whole time. It's not at the back of your mind the whole time. So that is one that I often have to come back to if I think, I know I should have got to that, but it just feels a bit hard, so I'm not going to. But I think the most helpful thing that I ever learnt was after I took Gretchen Rubin's free assessment, The 4 Tendencies. So for anyone listening, if you haven't taken it, I would hugely encourage you to take it. So Gretchen Rubin is someone who finds it easy to just get stuff done. And she doesn't understand, she does understand now. She didn't understand why other people couldn't. It just didn't make sense to her. So she thought, I am going to figure out what's going on. And she did loads of research, and she came up with 4 categories for people. And so she has carved us up into these 4 categories. And these all relate to how we respond to inner expectations, so things we want to do for ourselves, and how we respond to outer expectations, so things people want us to do. So the thing you might want to do for yourself is like, oh, I really want to start reading a book a month, or I really want to start going to the gym, or there's a project at work, I'd really like to get started with that, but no one else is holding me accountable for it. And then the contrast of that is people saying to you, I need you to get this done by X, Faye. Or so it might be your manager, or it might be a family member asking you to help them, or it could be a friend asking you to pitch in and support them with something. So that's the difference between inner expectations and outer expectations. And so the 4 different profiles that she has coined are called, let's see if I can remember them now, obliger, upholder, rebel, and questioner. And they all approach inner and outer expectations differently. So she realised she was an upholder. If she had something she wanted to do for herself, an inner expectation, she'd just do it, be fine. If someone else had an outer expectation for her, again, she would make sure that it got done. So that's the profile I dream I was, Bridget. If
and
only.
The result was?
If only. So I found out that I was an obliger when I took the assessment. So that means that I'm good at responding to outer expectations. So I will meet requirements that other people place on me, but less good at the inner expectations. And she explains in her, there's actually a whole book on it as well. I went down a complete rabbit hole. Like, I listened to all her podcasts about it.
I
read
think I
the
might.
book.
I love this.
Honestly, it's brilliant. And so she said a lot of obligers, she realised, really give themselves a hard time. So I guess this goes back to what we were talking about, being self-critical. They think there's something wrong with them. Like, why can they not seem to keep on top of everything, do these things that are important for them? And she said, actually, it's not about some sort of defect. I don't think she uses that word. Like, she says they shouldn't be being so critical. They just need accountability and they haven't realised it. Right. And that for me was the biggest light bulb moment, that to get stuff done, like to get as much done as I want to, accountability just makes the biggest difference in the world. I'll quickly touch on the other 2 profiles for people listening if they're thinking, no, I'm not either of those. So rebel is the trickiest one to be able to meet both, because they tend to rebel. So they'll actually push against inner expectations and push against outer expectations. But she has got a whole series of ideas of how they can actually support themselves to get things done. And she said, ironically enough, sometimes rebels will respond very well to extreme rigidity. So lots of people in the military, she said, are actually naturally rebels, but there's something compelling about the you've got to do this or this. I
have to just, because I'm going, oh God, I haven't taken the test yet. And who knows, it may well be that I'm thinking that if Bridget was sat here, she'd be going, oh, well, Bobby's a rebel. She wouldn't even want me to bother doing the blooming thing, probably. But it's interesting because I work with the Facet 5 profile quite a lot. And my control score, which is one of the facets, one of the traits, is a 1. And clearly heading towards a minus figure, because I just don't like control. And of course everyone's going, how has that actually but when you talk about it like that, you can sort of see what's happened, that I'm the spreadsheets and the order, because I'll be like, just somebody else do it for me, and I may well kick against being told what to do constantly, and yet I probably need it so I don't have to do it for myself. And of course now as a consultant I'm having to learn to do that much more for myself. So that is super interesting to hear about that. I can't wait to take the test, but we need to hear about the last one as well.
You have to tell me what your results are.
I definitely will.
Then the other profile is questioner. So they're fine at responding to inner expectations, but they can push back on outer expectations unless they believe it's the right thing to do or the logical thing to do. And so questioners you can often spot because they'll just ask you lots of questions. So if you're a manager and you say, okay, great, can you get this project done by Friday? And they go, why? And you think, oh my gosh, I'm your manager. I've asked you to do it. Just do it. They're not going to do it unless you tell them why. And they're not asking why to be difficult or annoying or to challenge your authority. They're asking why because they really want to understand the purpose behind it and what it's contributing to. And as soon as you explain that and they can see it's not a pointless activity, they will then do it. And this, again, was, I would say, probably the biggest eye-opening thing for me was the accountability piece. And I have had to build so much accountability into my working week now in my life, and I've achieved so much more because of that. And also, actually, for anyone who has the Essential HR Planner, I've introduced a free monthly accountability session where they get to come along to a group session with me and we all just work on some planning together, because there's something really powerful in having someone there who you've told you are going to do something. And then at the end of your time together, they say, have you done it? If you're an obliger, you want to say yes. You don't want to say, oh, I got distracted by email or doing something else. So the obliger thing was a massive revelation for me, but also the questioner was a big revelation. I just suddenly realised, oh my gosh, there have been people throughout my life, like personally and in work, and I've thought, do they not think I know what I'm doing? Why are they questioning me? And I would take it quite personally, as if they thought I was just rubbish or stupid or incapable of doing my job. And then I realised, no, they really just want to know more in more depth. And so I completely stopped taking it so personally. So I think that this fabulous tool and this fabulous framework is great for all of us, not just for understanding how we can become more organised or how we can get through more of the things in life that we want to, but also just how we interact with everyone else, especially if we have got management responsibilities or leadership responsibilities. It's so helpful to have that extra level of understanding for when you're working with people and you need to all get stuff done.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I think that the other thing it puts me in mind of is that it almost prevents you from using procrastination as an excuse. Because there's clearly, and we've had an episode on this, but clearly something that underlies why somebody would procrastinate about something. And when I was thinking then about the rebel element to it, if you haven't got somebody going, right, I mean, that's where the procrastination comes up, because you're so busy basically having a punch up with yourself or a metaphorical punch up with somebody else, rebelling against getting anything done. And so for me, I can see that how the procrastination piece gets intertwined with that. You know, more recently, I've been using the Pomodoro technique, which is quite rigid, but it really works for me because I'm like, right, I have 25 minutes and I must do this. And it really works. So there's a relationship with people and a relationship with time.
Yes, absolutely. And I totally agree. I think the Pomodoro technique can be great at getting your head down and actually getting some work done. It can be really, really helpful.
Yeah. I cannot believe we are at time, as always. You know, that's just, where the hell has it gone? I mean, you know, that's been absolutely perfect. So is there anything that I haven't touched on now that you're here and you have our audience absolutely listening to every word you're saying? Is there anything else from this sharp, not busy priorities that we haven't had a chance to touch on that you like? I really would like to say that before we get finished.
I think it builds on something that you said earlier when you said about working with teams to help them sit down and say, right, so what have you got to work on? When are you going to get it done? It made me think of a phrase that I came across from a time management book, which I have forgotten the name of, but the author of it is called Helen Beedham. And she talks about something called time leadership. And she says that she thinks it's one of the most important leadership skills that isn't really acknowledged or talked about. And as soon as I read those words, time leadership, I thought she is onto something, because what I've noticed is people, including me, naturally tend to approach time as a solo endeavour. How can I be more organised? How can I get more stuff done? And it's something that's quite hard for most people. I don't think there are many people who will go, I'm totally on top of everything. I'm such an organised person. I know I talked about upholders, but they aren't the dominant profile that is operating out in the world. And if you have got a team, or you are in a position where you have got any sort of influence within an organisation, I think some of the most powerful things you can do is help everyone with their time. So I've seen examples of people doing this really well. So I've seen one organisation I worked with, they didn't do this because of me, they were already doing it, it's brilliant, where they would have a no meetings time slot in everyone's calendar, and you were not allowed to book any form of meeting in someone's calendar at that specific time every week, because the meeting culture had just got completely out of control and people had no time to actually do their day job. They just did meetings all of the time. I've also seen organisations introduce wellbeing time where everyone has got a slot again in their calendar that they can use however they want for well-being, but it's to just give them a bit of breathing space. What I would love to see more organisations doing is something around this accountability piece we were touching on earlier. So there's loads of evidence now to show that virtual co-working, or if you're in real life, actual co-working, it's called body doubling a lot of the time, is incredibly effective. And so that is when you can do it in pairs or you can do it with a whole team. But I'll give an example as a pair. So if you and I, Bobby, were to have a body doubling or virtual co-working session together, what would happen is we'd decide on the time, we would meet each other, whether that's online or in person, at the same time, and I would start by saying, what are you working on in this hour? And you will tell me, and I will then tell you what I'm working on. If we're working on the same sort of project or the same kind of task, that seems to be extra helpful, but it doesn't have to be the same project or task you're both working on. And then we'll literally just put our head down, crack on with it, and then at the end of that hour, sort of 5 minutes before, we'll stop and I'll say, so how did you get on? And for some incredibly odd reason, all to do with this whole accountability thing, it is very unlikely that you will say to me, I didn't do it.
So I've done that with a friend of mine that I met on a social media course. It was perfect. So I'd love to. I think we should book that in, Faye. Honestly, I'd love that.
I do it 8 times a week. I've got 8 different co-working.
Oh, get rid of them. It's only me now. It's got to be space for me.
So, but again, I guess that links with another thing, another tool, which is planning out your ideal week and figuring out, okay, this is how long I've got to, in any week, what are the tasks I need to get done? When can I actually be doing it? And so part of the reason I've got those 8 slots in my calendar is because I know I've got 8 things I need to get done every week. And if I haven't got those slots in, then there's a big risk that other stuff will get booked in, like other meetings will get booked over it, or I'll just sort of put it off to the end of the week and then I haven't got time to do it. So although we're at time, I've just quickly squeezed in 2 things that I hope will be helpful for anyone listening.
Perfect. And if I could convince that this could be a 2-hour, then I would have just kept on talking to you, because there's just so much that comes from you. Honestly, it's amazing. I want to thank you. I will do that in a minute, because what I always do is I end with a bit of a quote, and I think that it just plays to absolutely what you've been saying is, and the quote is, you can do anything, but not everything. So on that note, Faye, thank you so much for your time and for such brilliant ideas that everyone can take up. And I really appreciate you having been here with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. And I love the quote. What a brilliant way to end our chat.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And we'll speak again soon. I'll have you back on, promise. Take best care.
Thanks for listening. All of the resources are on the website and the Spotify platform page. If you liked what you heard, please click follow and leave us a review. It's hard to believe that we're really at the end of season 6, but for the last episode of the season, Bobby and I are reunited for an emotional reunion. We're going to be talking about how emotions are part of our leadership journey, why it's okay bringing emotions to work, and no, it isn't about being fluffy. Come and join us next week for Being the Emotion in the Room.